Right, so welcome to episode 6 of the Fred and Arthur podcast. Today, actually, we have our first ever guest on the podcast. We've got Jack, also known as Redditor. So, do you want to introduce yourself?
Wow, where do I begin with an introduction? I don't even know. My name's Jack, Redditor. I'm a YouTuber as well. Got a little channel where I narrate stories, go on the internet, try and find funny memes, make them semi-entertaining, and some people watch.
Nice.
And that's it.
Got a good 500,000 subscribers for a...
Well,
He says a little, but...
It did well. It's chilled out now, but it's good fun.
Does this mean that you're insanely funny?
I mean, no, it doesn't, unfortunately. I wish I was. No, it means I have to steal content to be funny.
That's
how
me
it works,
too. That's the premise of ArthurTV.
Exactly, there you go.
Steal jokes. That's
Yeah,
you're in good company.
100%.
So funnily enough, I haven't actually told either Fred or Jack what today's podcast episode is going to be about, because I feel like the last few have been we've told a lot of stories, told a lot of facts. There's quite a lot of that, but I think I wanted this one to be quite conversational, for like us to kind of discuss how, things we believe or give our own sort of like on the spot opinions on some of the more interesting stuff. So today, the episode is going to be on Déjà Vu, Jamais Vu, and the Mandela Effect. Now, don't worry if you don't know what any of these are, because we'll explain them all. But I was actually thinking, you must know, I won't get into it too much, but you must know a fair amount of have you ever come across the Mandela Effect subreddit?
Oh, you know what? I think I probably have in a roundabout way, yeah.
You haven't done a video on it?
No, I've never done a video on it. But I've seen Mandela Effect stories and stuff.
Okay, good, because we've got a lot of the probably most common Mandela effects. Sure. And if you haven't done videos on it, you might not have come across them.
Good.
And I want to figure out what you guys think. So later on, we'll get onto the Mandela Effect. But to begin with, we're going to start with Déjà Vu. And although it sounds like quite a simple topic, there are so many theories about what causes it, and it can get really, really interesting. So just to sort of like set the definition. So déjà vu is the feeling that you have already experienced something that is actually happening for the first time. It comes from the French meaning already seen. So have you guys ever experienced déjà vu before?
I don't think so, to the extent that I know people experience. Like nothing like really vivid where I'm shocked and taken back by the situation.
Really?
Yeah, not genuinely, nothing kind of springs to mind, but it's one of those where I feel like you would potentially experience it and then overlook and then not really remember it happened a few weeks or months down the line.
That's true, you could probably, but I mean, I know there have been circumstances, not that I can perhaps remember, where I've been like, wow, I'd all of a sudden feel really spun out and be like, I swear I've been here before. I've been in the situation. I've experienced it. Actually happened only 2 days ago.
Really?
Which is part of the reason why I was like, oh, this is a good thing to add to this podcast.
Wow.
And I was just like, I swear I've been in this situation, I've said this thing, and it just hits you in one moment. And I'm like, wow. So have you had any?
I definitely have, but I was just thinking then, I haven't had it for a while. I think it was more of a thing that I experienced when I was younger. So as a child.
Funnily enough, it actually only starts among children or humans in general around 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah, okay, right.
It hits its prime in your teens and 20s. So we should really be in the prime of experiencing déjà vu. And then for some reason it tailors off. So
we're in our déjà vu prime right now.
We should be, yeah. So the fact that Fred doesn't really experience it much is interesting, but maybe, like you say, you don't really remember it. So there are a couple of causes that some people think, some of the root causes for déjà vu that people, because one of the annoying things is it's one of those things that's really hard to evoke in a lab. You can't get a bunch of people in, get them to experience déjà vu, because how do you give someone this like innate feeling of like, I've been here before and experienced this, but I can't put my finger on why? It's almost impossible.
Because it is kind of subjective as well, I guess, because it's not like it would perfectly mirror the situation or scenario.
Yeah.
But you would maybe take, I don't know, certain conversations that you had or experienced before, or certain visual aspects of the environment that you've definitely seen before.
Yeah.
So I think, it's very difficult to, I guess, like have any sort of scientific proof against, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, there are two kind of slightly boring possible causes, which is one's implicit memory. So some people with good recognition memory, that just gets triggered by certain situations. So if you get, you're in a similar situation to one you've been before, you can't exactly put your finger on why, but your brain's really good with recognition memory, and you go like, it really strongly brings up past memories, but you can't exactly put your finger on what. Just kind of interesting. Cryptomnesia, which is where information learned that's forgotten but stored somewhere in the brain. And so similar occurrences invoke the contained knowledge, so you get the familiarity without exactly being able to identify it. But one of the really interesting ones is what's called dual neurological processing. So basically, the brain's sorting of incoming signals is done in the temporal lobe of the brain's left hemisphere. However, signals also enter the temporal lobe twice before processing, once from each hemisphere of the brain, normally with a slight delay. So this is where it gets really interesting, because there are essentially parts of your brain that process what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and what you're experiencing a split second before your conscious mind goes, this is what I'm seeing, and you get to think about it.
Oh, I see.
So, for example, if you turn around and someone swings a bat at your head, your brain isn't going, there's a bat being swung at my head, I need to duck out the way. You kind of do it instinctively. And so one of the really interesting things I found out that's kind of linked with this, so this isn't particularly a much of a discussion topic yet, it's more the other reasons, but with blind people, right? So you get some categories of blind people where they've got the damage to the part of their brain that sort of consciously sorts through these images and sort of, says, I'm looking at a face right now. So they're blind, they can't see a thing. But weirdly, you can take those people that have that part that's damaged, but not the other parts that it filters through. And you can essentially walk them through an obstacle course. And even though they can't see a thing, they can navigate an obstacle course.
Yeah.
And another odd one is with those same blind people, if you flash faces in front of them, someone smiling, someone looking angry, they feel these emotions, but they have no idea why. Wow. So their eyes are looking at it. The part of their subconscious brain is going, this is a happy face, it makes us feel happy, but they just have no idea why.
Because you do kind of experience that when you close your eyes as well. When you close your eyes and you can kind of feel your surrounding a little bit, or someone coming near you, that must be a kind of similar feeling to what they get.
Yeah,
that's true. Even with no sound or
nothing,
like even a physical thing, you do get the sense that someone's nearer or further away from you. 100%.
Yeah, because people, I don't know if you guys ever get this, like the kind of sense. So this is where it kind of, that's obviously all in a scientific way, and you're almost like breaching the realms of science when you kind of get through the sort of like, you can kind of tell someone's looking at you. You look at a crowd and they're staring at you. Have you ever had anything like that?
Yeah, 100%. Or that's weird, because that can't be a neurological thing. I just don't see how that's possible.
No, yeah.
I'm normally doing the one that's staring.
You're a starer. Do you get caught staring?
Just watching people on the train.
So do you find when you're like staring at a pretty girl down the tube, she just snaps her head and looks at you?
Yeah, and I hold eye contact.
Yeah, never give it up. You just got to hold it.
Or the whole thing of like, your ears are burning when someone's talking about you in the room.
Oh yeah, and you
ever heard that, and you can't hear it, but you can kind of like get the vibe.
So I've always thought that's just like coincidence, though.
Yeah.
Even just because there's a chance that you're staring at someone and they look around, they see you, catch your glare. But then it can't be, because sometimes it just is like you both look up at the same time, or you'll know that someone's looking at you, just feel it.
Yeah.
And then they're looking at you even when you like. There's no way you could have known.
But the thing is, you can't live with just constant paranoia of like, oh my God, that person, I can feel it. It's just something that you just live with and accept. Like, there's obviously that coincidental aspect of someone just gazing and looking at you, but I don't suddenly get an urge of paranoia being like, oh, what is that guy? Why is he looking? And things like that. I feel like it could also have a negative impact on the way you live and you experience things.
Yeah, definitely. But it is, I almost think, like you were kind of saying, the number of times, if you think about how often you're on the tube and you just look up and look around, inevitably there's going to be a time when you're both just randomly look up at the same time. But as humans, obviously we identify patterns and stuff. You only remember the times when you look up and you go, what are the chances that we looked up at the same time?
Exactly. That's
but
what
you've probably been on the tube so many times in a row, looked up, looked down, looked up, looked down, and no one's happened, that eventually just the odds are the same that one person is looking at you. But it is strange. So that's what, this is where for me it gets particularly interesting, is the other possible, perhaps unscientific or even scientific, but unproven sources of déjà vu. And so one of the theories that people come out with is the parallel universe theory. So have you ever, I'm sure you've heard this idea that
I've heard of
there are an infinite number of parallel universes that sort of all exist, where it's almost identical, but like slight things have been changed. I mean, what are your thoughts on that in general?
I mean, people always say, like, I wonder what me in another universe is doing right now. Would I have acted differently? That sort of thing. I don't know. I think it's a bit of a downer answer, but for me, I just don't see how that could be possible.
You can't see.
But
I just can't see
by
it.
an almost parallel, you mean that it's the same version of me somewhere else, but we're not acting and doing the same things.
Well,
so like effectively, all the Freds in the universe or other parallel universe aren't on a podcast right now. Is that what?
But could there be an infinite amount of Freds on a podcast? Is it saying
that's what I'm saying, or is it that we're all acting and doing the same?
Every different trajectory.
Yeah.
I think there are things that, because of I think it's Schrödinger's equation that sort of maps everything out as a bunch of possibilities. I mean, there's a 0% possibility that you were born and teleported to the sun and exploded. I mean, there's a 0% probability of that. But there is a probability that when you were 6, you stepped out in front of a car and got hit by it. And in a bunch of different universes, there are all these potential paths. And in every universe, you've split off. So there's probably a bunch of universes, according to the theory at least, where we're all here right now and we're all in parallel. But in 10 years, you speak to the guy at the bar or you don't speak to the guy at the bar, and it just splits off a bunch of different times.
So you could effectively, if you could see all these different parallel universes, you could effectively see the best possible version of yourself if you made all the correct decisions in life.
Potentially.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting to see where you kind of stand in that leaderboard. So if, say, there are an infinite amounts, if you were like, say, 70% down the leaderboard because you made a fair few, or even just like a couple crucial decisions that went against you, you could be in a completely different place 10 years down the line, as you said.
Yeah.
So then the question is, if that is the case, where do you think you are on the leaderboard?
High. Extremely
high at the top.
What?
Yeah.
Are you happy with where you are at the moment?
I just think, I wouldn't want to have the mindset of like, I made awful decisions in my life. Like, I almost want to have that positive outlook, so then it would reflect on my decisions.
That's how I look, because if you were to say low, then you would maybe
negative
even be
spiral.
Yeah.
So high.
So I actually went through. So I can't remember if you remember when we were in sixth form, but I applied for to go to Oxford Uni to study law, and I got an interview, and I evidently flopped the interview because I didn't get an offer, and I was thinking at the time, like, I wish I could go back in time and just do that interview a bit better. I wonder if there are parallel universes in which Arthur smashed the interview and is now studying at Oxford.
Loads of them.
Look where they are now. They are smashing.
They are absolutely dominating, mate.
But I always think at the same time there will be, if that's true and that's, a place where I split off in that path, there's also many of those paths where I got into Oxford, but I was on a train that crashed, or I stepped out in front of a road, or I choked on a bit of beef steak celebrating my graduation. And so I try and always think, like, although there are plenty of times in my life that I regret things and I'm like, God, I could have done that better, could have studied this better. As long as I'm in a place where I'm happy and healthy now, I'm like, I could have got into Oxford, I could have, made more money doing this, or I could have bought Bitcoin age, whatever, back in 2011.
I was telling you that as well at the time. I just didn't do it,
That's why you're the only millionaire here.
But, the fact that I didn't, maybe in those alternative universes, maybe I'm dead, or maybe I'm depressed or unhappy. So, as long as you got your health.
Out of interest, going back to that interview, did you get that feeling straight away, like before the rejection?
What?
Like straight after the interview, you're like, that didn't go well? Or was it like you got rejected, then you're like, I wish I could go back, do this differently?
I thought it went okay, but I just know that there will have been a bunch of kids who had just walked in that like just knew sort of, the philosophy of law so much better than I did, and basic elements of contract law that, having studied law now, I now know. I look back at those interview questions and I know when they were asking me about, the guy, the cashier, like I bought a Coke off him and he gave me too much money back, whether I'm allowed to keep it. It was a question of implied terms and contract law and all that. And it wasn't necessarily about what was right or wrong.
Because that's the other thing as well, just came to mind, is that in a different parallel universe, you could get someone that also can experience time travel, so they can see the future outcome of those decisions. And in that sort of place, you're going to be a massive advantage versus what we always regret is a decision based off what we have available to us at that point in time.
Yeah.
Whereas if you then look back, I mean, you could look at infinite probably examples of decisions that could have gone differently, or even just like, say, placing a bet on the correct horse in a race or like on a football match. Like, yeah, obviously you could make infinite money. You could potentially be a lot happier, but it's just not the reality of the existence we live in.
Yeah.
I know for me, like I also applied to Oxford, didn't get in.
I can confirm I did not apply for Oxford.
But I know for a fact, well, I mean, I suspect for a fact that the other parallel versions of me that had gone to Oxford, if I was the same person at that individual time that didn't get the interview, would not have done as well. I don't think. I don't think
in life.
In life.
Well, at this point right now, well, especially during my time at uni, I don't think I would have done well at Oxford at all. Like, I just
kind
don't
of think the
think
same,
it would
you
have
know.
suited me at all.
Yeah.
Like, I know from my friends that went there, it's hard,
Yeah.
and I don't think I would have been capable of putting in that effort. And also, I don't think I would have had the free time to do other things like, make videos.
Yeah, I
Learn
think the
about
same.
myself
I would
as
never
much.
have
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I could right now be at that alternative universe guy that went to Oxford could be at a law firm in London.
I think that's probably quite likely. Do you not think?
and just be quite unhappy and just be like, kind of. I mean, I did end up joining a law firm and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
But perhaps if I had studied at Oxford, I wouldn't have started YouTube and had an alternative way out.
You
and
might
that's
also
obviously-
felt more obliged to continue, given that you've
Exactly.
got the best degree you could possibly
Imagine
have
as
got.
well,
Yeah.
right? Imagine those people that did get accepted or got into Oxford, but it was maybe the wrong decision, and then they dropped out. So it was like either the alternative is actually drastically different, because say if they went to a different university and they got a degree, that decision is actually the difference between graduating and not at all.
Yeah.
They could have just like been accepted. Maybe it was they were on the fringe, but like hated it, didn't get on well, probably at the lower end of the spectrum in terms of intelligence there.
That would have been us.
And then,
Oh mate,
then dropped
I would
out.
be here.
But that's
No
what I mean. Then
doubt.
dropped out and
Yeah.
then didn't even graduate or get a degree, and so wouldn't even get the opportunity to get a wouldn't even get an opportunity to get a law like
a job.
scheme.
Yeah, you
do
have
you
to,
know
or
what
you
I
have to
mean?
restart or just do something else. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. So we could sit there
100%.
and be like, "Oh, I wish I got in," but maybe in plenty of those universities we did get in.
Yeah.
We dropped out and we were lost.
And I did think
now
that
we
for
do
a
something
while.
we
Like,
like.
afterwards, I was pretty gutted that I didn't even
Yeah,
get an
me too.
interview. I was like, I mean, I didn't do very well on the aptitude test. That's pretty obvious. But I was a bit gutted because you put a lot of work into it. At least I thought I had done anyway, not compared to other people.
Yeah.
But like looking back in retrospect now, there's no way I would have been as happy had I gone. I just don't see it as that likely.
But then there's different decisions in life. So we're obviously pinning on this one example. There are different decisions where had you gone down that route, you may have been a lot happier.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
true.
saying. That's what I'm
And
saying.
that's-
But you don't. Yeah, that's why it's only hindsight.
Yeah.
And obviously, you have no idea how you would have actually reacted
Yeah.
to that situation. Who knows? I could have been the best history student ever. It's unlikely, but who knows? Maybe it's not unlikely.
Yeah, true. Maybe
you just can't tell. Yeah.
So that is why I think it comes back to what I was saying at the start, when I just go like, if I'm happy and healthy now, I genuinely just don't mind too much. Like, what's the point in even considering it? And so the reason that links into Déjà Vu, to go back to the original topic, is that some people think that with these parallel universes existing, where we're all kind of living the same experiences potentially an infinite number of times or just a lot of times over, is that it's almost like a link between those. So you're kind of going like, say for example, in a parallel universe, the only difference is that on your way up the stairs, well, there wasn't stairs, it was an elevator for the sake of argument.
There could have been stairs.
You tripped on your way here.
Yeah.
And so you were delayed by a second because you tripped, got back up, continued the walk. The conversation has been going here. But you in that parallel universe, I know that it would be the other way around. So if you tripped, you'd be a second behind. And so that parallel universe you is going, this is weird. I swear we've just said this and
I
I've just
see.
experienced this. And it's the disconnect between being that lagging behind and there's sort of a connection.
So for
going
that
on.
to be a thing, you'd have to be linked to yourself in a parallel universe. Is that what you're
Yeah,
kind of
so
saying?
that's what these people think. I mean,
You
that's
share
where sort
some
of it,
level of consciousness then. Is that what
You'd
you're
have
saying?
to,
Perhaps,
wouldn't-
yeah, there's some
I
sort
guess
of-
you'd have to.
and that's where it goes even further off, because I think the idea of parallel universes is quite strongly believed in the field of physics. Whereas I think if you asked a lot of the physicists that believe in the parallel universe theory or the multiverse theory, whether they believe that there's any consciousness sort of being transmitted between them, they'd probably say no. So it's a bit more of a perhaps outside the realms of science. But I mean, the idea of parallel universes is really, I mean, that it's one of the big talking points on it, is a kind of like, what's even the point in studying it and talking about it if we're never going to be able to prove it or disprove it,
But who knows?
What's the actual
Maybe
point?
at some point it'll become disprovable or provable. You know,
Yeah.
Like in the past, lots of things weren't, but now with the advances in science, you can prove things that you could never prove
True.
even 100 years ago. So, maybe
Yeah.
it's worth looking into a little bit.
Yeah, true.
Also, another scary thought as well is thinking how many of yourselves in the parallel universe have like experienced death or died.
How many?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
how
as a
many of you?
percentage?
So
how dead
like,
am I?
Well, it depends
so
if there's an infinite
therefore-
number, because technically if there's
Oh, true.
an infinite number of parallel universes,
That's true, yeah.
even if you haven't died in all of them,
I'm infinitely dead.
you've died in
Well,
an
it depends
infinite
which
number
way
of
you look
them.
at it, yeah.
Exactly. I'm
It's just a smaller
infinitely
number of
alive and infinitely
infinity.
dead at the same time.
It's smaller over infinity. Yeah, so it's still infinity. But
That's almost like a bit of a,
so you never die then.
So this links into, so this is kind of,
Am I
it's
immortal?
intrinsically linked in
Kind
terms of Schrodinger's cat. So have you heard of Schrodinger's cat?
I have, but I couldn't tell you what it is. But don't
Have
worry,
you
you
heard
tell
of
me.
Schrodinger's
Never
cat?
heard of it.
So it was a physicist. I'm pretty sure he was a physicist, but it was Schrödinger. He was studying, I think, quantum physics, and basically came across this idea that particles can exist in two states at once. So I think it would be, for example, like an electron can act as both a particle and a wave. But essentially, the idea of it is that until you look at that electron or photon or whatever it is, you can think of it as being both a particle and a wave. Whereas when you measure it, it's either one or two. So it's really weird. I'm trying to think whether I should bother going into explaining this because I don't understand it deep enough myself. But the cat is a bit more simple. So the idea is that you get an atom or a particle, a nuclear particle, right, that's going to decay. And you can't tell when it's going to decay. It's just going to decay at some point. And so you put that in a box, and next to it, you put this machine that basically detects when it decays. And when the particle decays, it releases a poison gas into the box. And inside the box, you also put a cat. So whenever that particle decays, poison gas is sort of sprayed on the cat and the cat dies, and you put it in a box. And because of this weird idea of a superposition where, particles can exist in multiple states at once, you can say that particle has both decayed and not decayed until you measure it being decayed, because it's in a superposition. And so when you close the box, until you check on it, because the particle can be considered both decayed and not decayed, the cat can be considered both dead and not dead at the same time.
I see, yeah.
And so the whole point of it is that it was an experiment, a thought experiment to kind of suggest how insane quantum physics actually is. Just saying, like, how can a cat possibly be both dead and alive at the same time? This is where certain physicists believe the universe splits. So because you can consider the cat both alive and dead, because of this superposition, it's in this kind of like quantum entangled, you've got this superposition. The cat is sorry, this is, I'll finish on this point because I won't get any deeper into it. But because you can consider this cat both alive and dead, and it is both alive and dead, when you check, you have to experience it being alive and dead. For us, that's impossible. So for them, some physicists believe that the universe splits in two at that point. And so you check on it at that moment, and you check on it and go, well, it's dead.
Yeah.
That was never alive. There's a separate universe where you've opened the box and the cat is alive. And so the kind of idea is that these separate universes are being kind of created. The universe is splitting into these kind of, every time there's a path, it's not as if you've just gone down one, it's split into every single probability. And each one of those paths goes on as a universe. So almost like, if for example, there was just one when you were born, every single time that there was a quantum superposition and an entanglement, it splits into these multiple different universes where they all go off.
Yeah. So if it's infinitely splitting, does that mean it's the time between it infinitely splitting is infinitesimally small? Like, is it just?
I think it's
permanently
instant.
Yeah. So not even when there's a difference,
so
or
they're
is it
parallel.
just always? Because then, like, if I was to move my hand like this compared to that or something,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, just infinite.
just always going.
Yeah, basically every time there's
It's quite a few, then, eh?
Yeah. I mean, this is.
So it's happened at every single.
We need a physicist on here to to think through the complicated stuff and
Let's
make
get him
it
in.
simple. But
We've got
sadly,
one
we haven't
here.
got him now.
Oh yeah, sorry.
That's your part-time job, isn't it?
Yeah, mate. Just get me in a lab. That's where I'm at home. Trust me.
But either way, I mean, I'm sure on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and stuff, we'll get much smarter people who understand it way better than I do, that can explain it much more clearly.
Yeah, these guys would have actually gone to Oxford.
But it's always an interesting thing, just the idea that, you know, there might be an infinite number of you out there that have taken all of these different paths and sort of like, yeah, you know, I guess we've already spoken about it, whether you live life with any regret, whether things could have gone differently for you.
What age do you think you were at the point, the earliest you kind of thought about this or explored this idea that they could, because do you think even when you're a toddler or super young, you think these thoughts come across your mind without ever looking at the scientific evidence?
Probably not in those terms.
Not in those terms, but I mean,
parallel
it would,
universe.
wouldn't it?
Not parallel universe, but
Just
saying,
regret.
Is there another
choice?
Universe?
What,
Is there
what
another
might have
Earth?
happened? Yeah.
Well, yeah, that in that, or the basic terms of regret and making decisions, or you learn as a young age not to touch a hob when it's hot, for example, and you learn those like basic facts of life. And then I guess you form that regret from quite a young age because you realize what you can and can't do and what you can do differently.
Oh, so more about like going back in time and being like, I wonder if I could change it.
Exactly, yeah.
Rather than there might be a universe where I have
Yeah.
changed it.
But you have that initial thought where it's like, okay, I'm not going to touch the hob again.
Yeah,
But then,
of course.
is the
And then
next
you're
step
like,
not
I
to
don't
think?
do it again. Yeah, and then it's like, oh, what I've done it again. I wish I didn't do that.
Yeah.
And you're looking back and you're like, I could have done things differently, even from a young age.
What about now? Is it something that you think about now? That I mean, it's a topic of the podcast, so it must be something that you've thought about a little bit to bring it up.
Me,
But
not,
as in,
not
like,
really, no.
Yeah, how often would you think day to day, unless you do experience a deja vu situation?
And if there's a big scenario in my life where I'm like, I've messed up so badly there, but I don't think other than really the Oxford interview, I've ever been like, I've made such a drastic error, I'd love to go back in time and change
But
it.
at that time, would you have genuinely thought, like, if you were offered the opportunity at that moment?
Yeah, if you could only have one.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't go back. That's
you
what
could
I'm
do it
saying
once,
is going
though.
like...
You could do it once. You had one token in your life. Do you think you would have used it at the Oxford? Because
No.
if that's the only example...
Surely not.
No, but if that's the only example you can think of right now, that clearly is something like that's at the
If I
forefront
had
of
to
your
use
memory.
it, but I
how
wouldn't
about
want to go
you
back
get
in
it-
time in case any of the bad parallel...
Not
you know-
now. I'm saying at the time. So say the 18-year-old Arthur.
Oh, if I
whatever,
could have gone back a week
Right
at
at
the
that
time.
moment.
Someone told you
10
in your
minutes.
life you got one token that you
Yeah.
can use. You can go back in time. I reckon 18-year-old Arthur would have gone, yeah, I'll take it now. And
Yeah,
and
probably.
you wouldn't be able to...
And redo the interview.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to... And that token's gone for the rest of your life. But
Yeah, true.
at that moment, you probably felt
Yeah,
like sheer
I would've-
desperation where you're
I
like,
would've been
I'm going to just do
desperate
it.
to redo it, yeah. Whereas it's only now, years later, I'm like, I'm grateful things turned out the way they did.
But I wonder how drastic the event would have to be that would happen in your life for you to ever really regret it. Because now you don't regret it, right? I mean,
yeah.
maybe you still think I should have done better on the interview, but you're not thinking to yourself every day when you wake up,
Yeah.
oh, damn it, I wish
No.
I'd done better, because you're fine with it.
So
I wonder what would have to happen. You
I
know?
think there's a possible easy-ish answer here in terms of if you've ever cost someone their life.
Yeah.
For example, I think in a lot of those things, you'd be like, I'm never going to use it. But I think, you know, if a year ago I'd let my best mate drive home drunk and he crashed his car and died, I think you wouldn't be like, oh, what happens if I go back and change that, but other things in my life aren't so good? Or like, you know,
That's true.
No,
you know,
I agree,
you know
I
that
agree, yeah.
your mum got on a flight that, you know, ended up getting lost over the sea. You'd be like, I don't really care where my life is now. Like, I'm desperate enough to go back and change that. And thankfully, I haven't lost anyone significant in my life so far. But that could be quite a big one, I think, for me.
Okay, so what about, say you lose a grandparent? It's quite a morbid question. You lose a grandparent in a non-natural way, but they were quite old, and you have this one token in your life.
No.
Do you use it then?
Because I've lost my grandparents in a natural way.
Okay, in a non-natural way though, but they were 60.
Oh.
Do you use the
60?
token?
Oh, so you're going, they're already quite old.
Because then you can say if your parents pass at 70, 80, then they've had more of a life.
Yeah.
In a natural way. So they've had a good life, and they've died in an unnatural way quite suddenly at 60. And you have this one token.
Oh, that's tough. You're basically asking me if I'd save my grandparents.
No, I'm not.
Or save for later on.
I'm asking you if you think that if you might need it down the road for something that's more tragic than.
But that's the thing. You're basically saying, yeah, exactly. So you're basically going like, is your grandparents' life
Worthy.
age 60
worth the one token that could substitute for anything else?
for
though.
something else later.
And
Yeah.
you don't know what that could be.
If you pose this situation to them, they might be like, nah, don't use it.
I think they would say don't use it.
I think they would say don't use it.
100%. Yeah.
I think if I was 60 and I had grandkids,
Yeah.
I'd like
60's
to
not that
save
old
it.
though.
No,
But
nowadays
it's old enough to have lived a life,
decent life.
You know.
Is it?
and had kids and
Well,
grandkids.
it's not ideal, but I mean, people die younger than
70's
60 all the
different.
time.
Well, I mean, if it's not that long, are you saying it's an easy
Exactly.
answer for
That
you?
makes it really difficult.
So would you use it?
60 years old, potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Moving on, because we still have a fair amount to cover, to be fair. Not a crazy amount, but some still interesting topics that I want to cover. Another one is another possible cause for déjà vu is the fact that the suggestion that we live in a simulation. So the idea that we are merely a simulation of a world of thoughts of consciousness by a more intelligent species than us, maybe even other humans that have gone down the line that are retracing history, sort of a simulation, and that it's sort of like the reason we experience déjà vu is because it's not real, or perhaps because it's part of a simulation that's already mapped out. What are your thoughts on that?
So what? There could be a glitch in the simulation that happens, which is why like things sometimes don't make sense, or
maybe
there's some sort of like misconfigured situation that's happened in the simulation.
So it has to make sense. That's as in the reason why this glitch happens isn't where we're not going to know it, but like we know that something has. It's logical to say that something has gone wrong to allow us to have these thoughts.
Have this weird thought. Yeah.
I mean, you could argue that that's that. Why can that not be? If you can't prove there's no simulation, then why is that not a valid argument?
Yeah.
You know, because there are obviously like neurological reasons, as you said earlier, that déjà vu exists. But if you can't actually prove it,
I mean,
then why not?
Do you ever question reality yourselves? Do you guys ever sit there and think like, is everything around me actually real? Are all these people that are walking past me in the streets,
all the time.
Are they actually? Is every single one of them a person with lives as complex as each of ours?
I think I used to think about that all the time when I was younger, but less so now. But I used to think you get that really isolated feeling of you're like the only human in a way.
Yeah, because you're the only one that sees anything like
everything
this.
Everyone else is just planted there and more simulated.
Almost like a Truman Show. You seen the Truman Show?
No.
With Jim Carrey.
Oh, great film.
One
of the few films I've watched. You see, I'm not really a film person, but it's a great film. But that's because everyone is their own main character. So I love that film. For me, I never think like that at all.
You never think like, are these people real?
No, never. Never ever has ever crossed my mind. I think I'm too logical. I can't get out. I struggle getting out of that kind of reality sort of. This is just how it is. For me, it's more just purpose. And I look at someone and think like, what are they, what's going on in their life? What are they doing? That sort of thing. Because, everyone is as complex as we think we are. Yeah. But you're never going to know the inner intricacies of anyone really.
Fair.
So for me, it's purpose more than are they real? Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting. There was actually a recent analysis done sort of calculating in far more complex terms than I think we would even understand if we read the research paper a million times over. But they calculated that the chances are about half and half that we live in a simulation. And that's
really?
that's like scientists at Oxford University, I think, that have been working on this since 2003. But
is that kind of a loose term though, a simulation? So what is it? Could it potentially be someone controlling our life, or is it? So
you know how we kind of spoke about AI the other day? Like, I mean, for us, technology is advancing all the time. It's getting more and more advanced. I mean, you look at Grand Theft Auto 10 years ago and how it is now. Like, it's getting so much more complex. The worlds are getting bigger, more realistic looking. Essentially, the idea is that if we keep improving technology and AI, we will eventually be able to create a reality inside a computer that is indistinguishable from our own.
I think that's guaranteed.
Yeah.
I really do. I don't know if you've tried like a very good VR experience.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
It's you do forget you're in the VR at some points, don't you?
Very quickly, I found. When you have the audio and you have like and you can move around.
Yeah.
It's like so few steps away from, I think.
Yeah, we are close, I think.
It's super close. Yeah. And it's very dangerous as well, I think, for people like growing up now.
Definitely.
They'll be able to access that, and you go home from school and you put your headset on. Maybe you don't even have a headset anymore. I mean, who knows? I think that's probably the next step. It's not wearable
just like
tech.
Glasses or whatever.
Yeah, or even just like a chip or something.
True, yeah.
I don't know. Maybe down the line, but there'll be a stage in not too distant future where you won't have to wear anything, I don't think.
Because Elon's talking about that Neuralink implant, isn't he? The chip implant.
Yeah, chip in the brain.
Oh, and you can just pick a song and listen to it, and you're hearing the song, and you're not.
He's a massive advocate of it, though, isn't he? Like, he thinks life will be so much better.
He thinks we live in a simulation.
Oh, really?
He thinks we live in a simulation now. He thinks he's convinced that we live in a simulation. But I mean, yeah, like if you just think, I think that's quite a scary one. Almost what you're saying with the VR headsets. The kind of like, if you think about how many people live lives that are just like, I mean, we're very privileged in sort of like, we were talking about this as well once, like being in the Western world, being able-bodied. Like I think if I got in an accident and I lost all like control underneath my neck, and someone was like, you can put a chip in your head and walk around all day, every day and play football again and run. And like, I'd be like, why would I ever want to live in a reality where I can, when the possibility of living in this virtual reality, but it's indistinguishable.
It's true. And also, like, if I was able to play football in VR, I might actually have a left foot. So that's got to be...
You might be Leo Messi.
You know,
you might be playing. You might be in Qatar.
You could play for
right now.
You're a Chelsea fan, aren't you?
Yeah,
you could play for Chelsea.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, genuinely, you could actually walk out and you'd feel like in Stamford Bridge.
Yeah. You'd hear the noise.
It'd be the same.
What difference would you? Yeah.
There'd be no difference. I guess that's the point, right?
So do you think as well? Then the longer you stay in that virtual reality, the more real it feels.
100%. Yeah. The thing for me when I experienced it was the fact that it genuinely did feel like it was substituting my senses for
that's crazy
non-real stuff. It was. Yeah. I mean, have you ever seen those videos of people being in VR for 24 hours or stuff like that?
No.
And they do end up saying that they're like, it's really scary. Yeah.
They're like, take me back there.
That will become a thing.
Yeah.
Where your virtual reality will be more.
You value that more.
And that is terrifying because if you get to the stage where your actual reality is worse than your virtual reality, then is there any point to even being in the real world anymore?
But then you still need to you need basic functions like eating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Drinking.
But what if...
So 48 hours, you could literally die.
I think that someone will die in VR.
You just stay on it too long and you forget to check out.
Not drinking.
Because you get that
heavy
gaming... I'm not a huge gamer, but you get heavy gaming sessions where people don't eat for hours.
There are people that have died gaming, aren't there?
Exactly.
Oh, really?
And they've forgotten to eat or drink and they've just died. Or they've chopped through 8 monsters in their 36-hour gaming session and just had a heart attack.
I mean, just yesterday, I was watching a compilation of people passing out when they complete... what are they called? You know, time challenges where you have
speedruns.
Yeah, but they get so elated and they pass out.
Really?
Because they're so invested and they've been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
Exaggerate that into being actually virtually in the game. Mate, I don't know.
Yeah.
There was a point actually brought up by the Low IQ pod recently. I saw a clip of theirs, and it's sort of like it's something I used to think all the time was, how do we know that what we're seeing is reality?
I think about
like,
that.
what happens if you're actually in a place where your mental function isn't functioning properly, and you're sitting here and we're like, I'm on this podcast.
Oh, that's awful.
See, that I can get behind.
That's
you're actually in an alleyway on a street, just going.
But then why does it matter?
Speaking to yourself.
That's the other thing. That's like living in virtual reality where it doesn't matter. Because
that's a very reassuring point.
Yeah, what you're experiencing right now and what you think you're seeing is good fun. Is like sitting on a podcast with the boys, having a good time.
True. Why does it matter?
And why does it matter?
I'd love to know, like, if I'm not here, where am I? You know, or like, what am I actually experiencing?
Just on the floor.
That's something I can definitely get behind because that there is no way of knowing.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to Descartes' first principle of philosophy, the cogito ergo sum, the sort of like, I think, therefore I am. It's the only thing you can know is that you exist because you're thinking. It's the only thing you can know. And then it also goes back to sort of like, you know, that's like really ingrained in philosophy in general, isn't it? Like Plato's allegory of the cave, the butterfly. I can't remember who the Eastern philosopher was. That's the sort of butterfly dream. And so he dreamt he was a butterfly and fully believed he was a butterfly, was enjoying life, woke up as himself. I think I have his name written down actually. Zhuangzi. And he woke up and was like, oh, I'm Zhuangzi. And he's like, but when you're dreaming, you don't know you're dreaming. It kind of goes back to, we had the discussion of dreaming and lucid dreaming. But when you're dreaming, you just believe it. You never question it. Sort of everything makes sense. Like, he's like, how do I know that I'm not the butterfly that's fallen asleep and I'm dreaming that I'm the human? And it's like, there is no way of testing anything because you can't even believe your own senses as a human. Like, you know, you can... And it kind of relates back to the dreaming thing because we were talking about like when you're younger, you know, you have a wee in your dreams and then you wake up and you've done it in real life. I always worried that when I was, this is so embarrassing, but when I was like, should I even say this? Yeah.
What?
When I was like touching myself.
What? Whoa, this escalated.
When I was a teenager and I was like really young, like 12, 13, I was like, what happens if I'm just mentally not with it person doing that in the streets
Oh yeah,
or
true.
at the dinner table.
Mate,
That
And
wouldn't
it
cross
used
my
to
mind.
scare the hell out of me.
I can say it, but thankfully I never experienced that. But
Yeah,
now
well,
that
now
you said
next time
it,
you
it might
will.
start happening to
Next
me.
time you
Yeah, you're
will.
never
Jeez.
gonna masturbate
You'll be sitting
again.
there and thinking,
I
I'm
know.
in my bedroom and the door's locked. But
Yeah.
actually, you're just someone who's not fully functional, that's standing there
not
literally.
for me, not for me.
And maybe that's what the guy that, is doing that down the alleyway that seems away with the fairies just thinks he's somewhere he should
In
be.
his bed or something.
Yeah,
Wow.
and it makes you almost judge them less and just go like, there's actually a really interesting film with, who plays Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs?
Oh, I don't know.
Great. He's a British Welsh actor.
With the
I don't usually do this, but I thought I'd pause the podcast here for a second because this is a really interesting example of something I had in my notes, but we didn't get around to discussing, which is the phenomenon known as Presque Vu. This is the feeling you experience when you're struggling to remember something, but with the sense that recall is imminent. For example, when the word you're looking for is on the tip of your tongue. When you're trying to think of a word, your brain is often blocking out similar words and accidentally also blocking out the word you're looking for. Interestingly, this is why it's often a shared experience, because giving an example of a blocking word to others so that they can help you try and recall the word you're looking for will cause them to block out the correct word too. However, when the topic changes, that's often when your brain stops blocking words and you can find yourself recalling what you were looking for. This perhaps explains why here, when I was unable to recall the name of the actor, Jack wasn't able to either. It wasn't until after the podcast finished that we both remembered his name was Anthony Hopkins, and the movie I'm about to reference is called The Father. Anyway, he's in a film about being an old man going through dementia.
Yeah, with the in his house.
In his house. And he'll sort of come in and there'll be a stranger there and you'll be like, whoa, that's really freaky. Who's this stranger? And it's actually his son and he just doesn't recognize him. And because we've never seen him, you see it through the eyes of him. Yeah. And it really makes you appreciate it more. And I think a lot of this does make me appreciate people who potentially, paranoia, like people who are paranoid, like clinically kind of makes you appreciate them because they don't know reality.
You discussing this is like a ticket to paranoia. Like you even implanting these thoughts.
Yeah, I was fine for this part.
Yeah, it makes you more paranoid.
Big trouble.
Because there's from what you're saying, everyone could have a different existence or see their life different visually.
Yeah.
So it's not even like, I guess you got some comfort in that. It's not like everyone sees it the same and it's just you who sees like we're on this podcast, but you're actually on the street or whatever. Whereas if everyone has a different visual existence, then there's some comfort in that because we're all kind of going through that same situation. Yeah.
It is interesting. And so, yeah, so that's kind of, I guess, to sum up the simulation, just kind of like, maybe we live in a simulation and this idea of déjà vu, this like I've experienced it before, is just because whatever computer simulation we're in, it knows what's coming next because it's calculating it ahead of time to render it. And maybe that's just because we're simulated consciousness.
The thing for me is I didn't really used to ever think about these things in that sort of way. But when people that are far more intelligent than me and scientists and, say what you want about or feel what you want about Elon Musk, but he's definitely more intelligent than me, are thinking these things. You can't just, say that these, you have to accept that there's a reason why people believe these or think that these things could be a reality.
Yeah, when you've got the leading physicist saying it, it's not just someone
Who
going
am I to
like,
say it's not a thing?
Yeah.
I can't just discount that.
I mean, not to like disrespect it. Obviously, there'll be plenty of people that believe it, but there's there are some ideas that hallucinogenics take you to a new plane of existence. And I would say that's that's one that people perhaps reject more because, it's perhaps less of like a material science that you can study. But I guess it's just as provable or disprovable as the multiverse theory. But I think it does give slightly more credence to the theory itself when you go like, wow, the literal leading minds and physicists are going, we genuinely believe with strong possibility that we live in a simulation, that there are multiple universes out there that are parallel or deviate slightly. It is strange.
Because literally my whole thing was that this just can't be a thing. It's just ridiculous. I guess that's how my brain works. But yeah, over the years, you can't just ignore what people that are studying this in their life
you kind
are
of
saying.
just dabble into it. I think you could just massively stress yourself out.
I don't mean I'm not. Yeah,
if you read every single lead physicist and their kind of theory on parallel universe or how we exist, but
Oh yeah, it could drive you mad.
It'd drive you insane.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's like to what level do you think it's worth actually exploring it yourself and understanding it? Because is it definitely a positive thing?
Yeah.
Well, exactly.
I don't know. Yeah, are you wasting time? But I mean, there's certainly. I mean, you know,
It depends, because if it's like we're going to be approaching a time where we're going to live in the metaverse and, you know, that whole experience of extended virtual reality and it becomes almost feels like a reality, then if that's going to come soon, then that's something that you have to educate yourself on.
Because we may be making the decision someday, certainly, or, to be like,
you know, people might be living in that universe rather than the actual reality. So that's where you have to kind of research and consider it. Whereas if it's just like there's operating parallel universe of us all like existing in different universes, then you can sort of carry on your life as you are without and being oblivious to it and doesn't change anything.
That's exactly how I completely agree. Because when it becomes like, you know, very necessary for you to know that in your own life, and you can actually see the effects that it might have knowing this information or researching it.
Or even if it could, there's like potential financial gain, then it's like worth it. If people are like buying and selling real estate in the metaverse, or
that's going to, but it already is huge.
Then you got an incentive to look into.
Yes, yeah.
All right, so I think we should move on to, because we've still got a couple of topics to cover. The third, I guess, big one that people believe that's perhaps not one that we can ever prove scientifically, perhaps, is the idea of reincarnation. So a lot of people think that déjà vu comes from past experiences, past lives where you've experienced something. You know, there's all kinds of different reincarnation. There's the idea that, you know, perhaps you were born as a frog and then born as a human and then you're going to be reborn as something else. Some people believe that we live almost like a déjà vu life where you're born, you live until you die, and you just repeat that forever. You're just born in so déjà vu.
You just forget, and then you
forget,
repeat.
and you're literally, the moment you die, you come out of your mother's womb or whatever it is. And so for them, the déjà vu is the just lingering, you know, it's like you haven't deleted all the files. There's a lingering memory there of a previous life that you've either lived in the exact same one or a previous similar one. Have you guys ever thought about like reincarnation? Or
I've definitely thought about it, because it's a common thought, isn't it? But I've never really took it too seriously.
Right.
I never thought that I'd reincarnate to like an animal, for instance.
How about you?
Yeah, I can't lie. It's never really crossed my mind.
Never crossed your mind.
I don't think I'm that sort of thinker when it's just me on my own thinking, what do I actually really believe here?
Yeah.
Reincarnation is the one that I've never really given much time of day.
So what do you think about when you think about that?
I'm very morbid in the fact that I think you just die, and it's the same as before you were born. You just you're done.
Infinite nothingness that you don't experience.
Yeah, which is very sad, but kind of take solace in the fact that, you know, you have your life and that's it. But again, with like what we were speaking previously, the fact that it's such a commonly held belief, maybe not billions, but, you know, millions of people believe in reincarnation.
It stems
maybe
from
billions,
religion,
right?
Maybe billions,
maybe billions. I don't. Yeah, I mean, it's a feature of many religions. You know, maybe billions. Again, who am I to say that it's not a thing?
Yeah, I mean,
because there's no way of ever disproving it or proving it. I mean, right now, then
you can't rule it out. Even like as someone who goes, I'm particularly of a scientific persuasion where I only really believe things if there's evidence or it's a logical conclusion to draw. The logical conclusion to draw to some extent is that you can't disprove it, so you don't know for sure.
Exactly.
So you could come back. There was a really interesting, I think it was a post on Reddit a long time ago. I remember talking about it in year 5, I think, on, can't remember, to one of my friends, just like, we were kind of like, just trying to figure out what happens after you die. Sort of when you're around that age, you really are quite scared of death when you sort of first understand it, and you're like, oh, and there was this, I think it might have been a poem or something, but it was beautifully written. And it was an idea that basically when you die, you're put back on Earth as just another human. And the general idea was that you are the only entity that exists, and you just are born and relive through everyone. So when I die, you know, I might be reborn as a 8th century Chinese peasant, and then I may die and then be reborn as a, you know, Victorian housewife. And you actually, every single person on Earth isn't an individual soul or entity themselves. It's just you being reborn and experiencing it. And I think one of the really nice takeaways with that was it's always made me think, because it's a possibility, to almost like try and treat everyone as well as possible, because I would never want to inflict suffering on an animal or a human. Not that I've got a natural tendency to, and this is the only thing stopping me, but it's a really nice thing, you know. If I trap a fly or a wasp in my apartment, I'll get it in a cup and let it go rather than like squishing it. And I just kind of think like, if on the off chance one day I'm reborn as that homeless person or that fly, I don't want to be killed and smushed and suffer a horrible death. I don't want to be a rat that's trapped in a gruesome rat trap. You know, I want to be in one of those traps where you run into a box and you're set free, or, you know, I want an extra hot meal.
It's a funny thing.
It's an interesting thing.
So what do you think about, you know, for example, mice and rats and stuff that are used in labs, or animals that, not animals, you know.
Or even zoos, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine if you were like wanting to run free and you were trapped in a cage.
I think animals is the easy one to use here, like animals that are treated poorly.
Yeah, say not in optimal conditions.
Because zoos I find zoos always a hard one, because we grew up in Jersey and there's only one zoo and it's a wildlife trust. So they're all there for like, the animals are all treated really well. Yeah. They're all there because they're endangered, and it's sort of like helping. It's like a conservation trust. So yeah, maybe experiments. It's become such a difficult moral question, doesn't it? I mean, it's a big reason I got into philosophy recently, because I'm not a religious person, to like figure out where my, you know, because I believe obviously in subjective morality, it's not an objective. There's no like, God has set out these rules for me and this is what's moral and it's what's not. I have to figure it out for myself and I kind of like the fact that it kind of goes back to pre-religion, you know. Obviously, like, I grew up Christian, and thinking like, you know, you've got even pre-Socratic philosophers from thousands of years ago that were thinking like, you know, we didn't necessarily need those religions to come in and say, you know, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates were asking the questions like, how do you live a good life? What does it mean to live a good life? All those kind of things. And like, what does it mean to be a good person? For me, I think I've eventually settled with the morality of like reducing suffering, like universal suffering, as low as possible. But that becomes very, very difficult when killing and making 1,000 mice suffer to test a drug that will save 1 million people from cancer.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I'm saying.
It's so difficult.
It's a tough one though, isn't it? Because that's, I think, one of the great benefits of religion is that it gives you those morals straight away, and they are generally, you could argue, relatively good.
Yeah, but even then, they can only, I mean, I'm sure religious people will get involved in this debate as well, because religion almost reminds me of law when I was studying law, in terms of like, the government can only give you a certain legal framework. They can't set out every single time when something is murder. You know, they've got to say, this is the rough definition of murder. Courts should apply this as well as possible and develop it with each case. It's kind of like
what you said right at the beginning in your interview at Oxford about the morality. You went down the moral route of if you get too much money back, should you give it back? Yeah. There's no law for that. No. Well, sorry, you've literally said there is a law.
There's a law, but you've got to apply it to different circumstances.
Yeah.
So for Christians, some might read an extract from the Bible. There's no part in the Bible that says killing 1,000 mice to save 1 million humans is wrong. They have to go from all of the lessons they learned in the Bible and apply them themselves. So there's a certain element of subjective teaching in there. Obviously, you've got imams in Islam, and you've got scholars and stuff that can kind of provide interpretations and stuff, but even they disagree among themselves. So I think each individual human has to decide for themselves whether their moral framework is on philosophy that they've got from themselves, or it's innate to them, or they've got it from religious teachings, whatever it might be. Everyone's kind of got to answer a lot of these questions themselves, built on their own sort of moral framework that they've built. So
because another thing as well is scale is a factor. So on the magnitude of the problem will then also impact the framework of the rules, because if you say you have tight regulation or tight framework, a legal framework, you can say, for instance, apply that rule to, say, the example that you were both saying about having too much money, and there may be some sort of leeway on that. But if you multiply that by 100x, and then suddenly you're taking 100k instead of 10 pence from a store, then you can't almost... There is a certain leeway, and there's different rules applied dependent on the magnitude of the situation. Yeah. So that's when there's somewhat of a subjective viewpoint depending on the scenario.
Yeah, and every case in almost everything in life is going to be different. You know, you're not going to have exactly the Good Samaritan story every single time. You know, you're going to get some bad people who need help, and it's like, you know, at what point are evil people evil for good? At what point do people need our help? I mean, yeah, it's all very complicated, isn't it?
It is tough when you're trying to govern a country or a state with physical
that's why
laws.
there's so much conflict.
Yeah,
isn't
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
it? Yeah, it's so difficult.
Because and also you can't then just start to put your morals onto civilians. Really, like your moral ideology is just not going to work as well as simple laws. Like, you know, you can't kill somebody. So yeah,
But
ultimately
even
you've got to
then-
leave it up to society a little bit.
I mean,
you can have.
But then there's conflicting laws, isn't there, dependent on the country? Like, look at Qatar at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
So then there's that argument where it's like, which rules do you follow?
Yeah.
The place
And
you're in.
even with things like, for example, you think murder would be the easiest one. Like, tell the courts, if someone kills someone, they go to jail. Easiest thing ever. But if I shove you and you stumble back a bit too far and then a lorry hits you out of nowhere, you know, have I killed you then? Or if I slap you in the face and you get a cut and it gets infected and gangrenous and you die from a brain infection, you know, have I killed you then? Should I go to jail for 25 years? I mean, this is obviously what we study in law. It's kind of like applying the legal definitions. But even in the most simple cases where you think, don't kill someone, or, you know, you get into a street fight or whatever, someone starts on you, you hit them in the jaw and they've got glass jaw, whatever it's called, glass jaw syndrome, and they fall and they crack their skull and die, you know, have you killed them? I mean, you know, that's obviously a big debate going on now. And there's no way of providing an absolute framework where every case and every scenario is answered.
So does it always come down to being subjective, really?
That's why
'Cause you
things
can
go to
never-
court.
Yeah.
And court cases are so
Yeah.
drawn out
But
because
that's why, as a lawyer, you have to be so intelligent as well. Because it's not just literally like, read this textbook, apply it to every scenario.
yeah, it's not like, oh, this is murder, you go
Exactly.
in.
It's so
that's why
difficult.
it's almost, the legal system is almost frowned upon, because it's almost like the
Two by the
smarter lawyer
book.
you've got, or the better lawyer you've got, you know, you can have two
Yeah.
lawyers come in and he gets found guilty, or you can get 100 lawyers. There's like a famous example that we were taught that was like a guy was caught speeding by a police officer, very, very rich guy, speeding, going 80 in a 30 zone. And you go like, and they process us like, how would you get him out of that? And you go, well, the speed gun caught him. Like, you know, what could you possibly say? And a really, really smart lawyer, because he's very rich, came in and went, okay, you know, the speed gun, has it got a warranty? Has it been checked? You know, it's supposed to go through routine checks every week. Was it checked the week before? And it wasn't. And it wasn't checked 2 weeks before. And so he said, so you can't reliably say that it was reliable at the time because it wasn't checked as it was supposed to be. And he got off because the speedometer, and it's
That's
Mate, but I
unreal.
wonder-
it's the sort of
at
thing
what
where
point,
a cheap lawyer probably wouldn't have thought of
oh
that.
no, you don't even have a lawyer.
And-
You just
and-
like, well,
and-
you have a lawyer, but
yeah.
you know, it's just like that.
And
Like,
so the subjectivity
did
in the
it.
law means
Yeah.
that whoever's got the better argument, or who can manipulate the law in their favor the best and convince the judge that they're right.
but will
actually
that,
wins
will
the
that always
case.
be the case? You think, in terms of law, because you know what thing could happen that you couldn't get out of? Like, is there an absolute thing that, you know, I shoot you in the head with the best lawyers in the world? Can I get out of that?
But that's what
Well,
I'm
I mean,
saying.
depends.
Probably,
who
right?
saw it?
Going
Who
back to
saw
your
it?
point.
With no context,
Yeah,
or with all the context, there's probably a way to get out of anything.
almost. I reckon if live on TV in front of the nation, it was being recorded, you
Could you say
Just-
that it was
macheted.
manipulated or something?
Maybe,
Like,
yeah, exactly,
literally, I don't
yeah.
know. It's probably anything you could use in any circumstance to get out of something if you had unbelievable lawyers.
yeah, true.
I don't know.
Yeah,
But then, there's that whole moral compass though as well, isn't there? That's applied to the situation, because this might be the most expensive, best lawyer, but that person might still have been speeding.
yeah.
He's just got out of
He
it.
will have been. Yeah,
Oh, he definitely was. Yeah.
So therefore, like, I don't know. There's also the lawyer's obviously got an objective, but it might not necessarily be the best decision morally in terms of that car was speeding at risk, could have killed someone. Maybe charges should have been applied.
Yeah, I mean, there's evidently, I mean, you know, the law fails us morally all the time. I mean, it's supposed to the law is supposed to be there as the moral kind of, you know, like, we as a society agree that you shouldn't be able to kill someone, but everyone will disagree. I mean, there'll be a massive disagreement on, you know, if my mum is suffering terribly from an illness, should I be able to take her to the doctors and her have an injection that, you know, ends her life because she doesn't want to suffer anymore? Is that murder? Some people think yes, some people say no. That's why you have to go to Switzerland to get it done. And it's like, you know, as you can keep narrowing it down until eventually you get to a point where everyone disagrees. It's one of the funny things in politics, I think, in general, is that like everyone focuses so much on everything that everyone disagrees with. If you sat someone who's generally left of center and right of center, you know, they'll go, oh, we disagree on abortion or LGBTQ rights or all that kind of stuff. But you actually, if you think about the majority of the things you agree with, you actually agree with a lot more than you think. But everyone, you end up fighting about the things that you disagree with.
I was going to ask you actually, where do you stand on the debate with lawyers defending people that are clearly...
that was kind of the point I was alluding to.
So if your client comes to you and says, I've murdered someone, I need you to get me off. I think the way that lawyers tend to justify it, and what we were taught, at least in our qualifying exams, was the idea that in a fair society, everyone has the right to a fair trial. Yeah. And so it's not your job. I mean, as a lawyer, you just go, I'm not going to lie to the courts and say, oh, he wasn't speeding. But I'm going to say, okay, if you think my client was speeding, show me the proof. And if you can't prove it, if you're going, oh, we've got a speed gun, but it's out of date, it's the prosecution's fault for not having a strong enough case to convict. And you just go, it's my job as a lawyer to give my client the best defense possible, to go like, it's on the state. I do understand the question. But even if you know
100%, like you have I assume it's CCTV, right? Of the guy speeding, or whoever's speeding, and you know 100% they're speeding. So morally, you're having that debate with yourself. Yeah. Yes, obviously you're doing your job, and I think that's what most defense lawyers will say is, I'm here to do my job.
Yeah. All I'm doing is giving him the best defense available,
which is what he deserves. 100%. But then you yourself know.
Yeah, I could never become a criminal lawyer, because I couldn't sit there with someone that goes like, you know, oh, I've got a murderous spree and I've murdered a bunch of people. They just haven't got enough evidence. I couldn't get them off and just sleep at night, because I wouldn't be able to sleep at night thinking they could be out murdering people. But you know, there's a hell of a lot of money in there for the top lawyers that can get people off.
That's the thing.
So money corrupts people.
And is that immoral? Because everyone is, you know, has a right to a fair trial.
Yeah, exactly.
It's part of the system. Like, how immoral really is that? You know,
maybe it's the don't hate the player, hate the game. And
because also, if you don't do it, someone else would do it.
Yeah, but also and maybe it's change the system. Don't have a go at that lawyer for being immoral necessarily. Yes, exactly. Although you might be justified. Go like, why have we set up a system in which
he can get away with it?
He can get away with it. But I mean, what else are you supposed to do? I mean, you need client-lawyer privilege, where you go, you should be able to tell your lawyer everything. Like, the system is well thought out, you know, with three guys sat here on a podcast, but the law, especially in England and Wales, has been evolving for centuries, and many men much smarter than us have gone through the evolution of it, and it's obviously going to evolve. But we're at a place where like everything is a very difficult question. There might be one or two situations where you go like, this is ridiculous and need changing, but a lot of it, they're very difficult, complex questions, but very interesting to talk about.
And also, it's impossible to ever have a solution that fits, you know, 100%.
Yeah.
That's going to work for every single case ever. So
exactly,
you've got to get as close as you can to everyone being happy with it, I think.
And that's the good thing. You know, we've had it's illegal to murder, and every single time there's a case, you get closer and closer and closer to the right answer for society, where you go, well, we don't really need to argue about this, because we've already agreed that if someone punches someone in the face really hard, they could reasonably foresee that the person would die, and so it is murder. So you don't have a court case on every single one, because you go, we've got precedent that goes, it's close enough. So there was some really interesting stuff here. So I mean, we've got the last couple of minutes. I think it might be, I think on reincarnation, there was a really interesting story I just wanted to bring up. There were quite a few, but I think I'll just go through one. So this is almost goes, I wonder if you'll be convinced by this at all. So reincarnation, you can't prove, but you get a lot of examples of people who go, I've lived a past life, I remember my name. And actually, if you go to this place like 100 miles away, open their closet, you'll find a green gem at the bottom of the suitcase. And I'm a 5-year-old kid and I've never been there, and they go and find it. And so there was a famous case of a guy called James Leininger. He was a 4-year-old boy from Louisiana who believed he was once a World War II pilot who had been shot down in the Battle of Iwo Jima between the US and Japan. Have you heard this?
Yeah, I have heard this.
And so his parents first realized that he had these memories when he was 2 and woke up. He had a nightmare yelling, airplane crash, plane on fire, little man can't get out. He talked incessantly about his plane crashing, and he was disturbed by nightmares several times a week. He also knew details about World War II aircraft that would seem impossible for a toddler to know. For instance, when Andrea, which I think is his mother, referred to an object on the bottom of a toy plane as a bomb, James corrected her, saying it's a drop tank. Another time, he and his parents were watching a History Channel documentary. The narrator called a Japanese plane a Zero, and James insisted that it was a Tony, and James was right on both fronts. He also said that he had been named James in his previous life and that he had flown off a ship named the Natoma. Looking into it, his parents discovered that there was a World War II aircraft carrier called the USS Natona Bay, and in its squadron was a pilot named James Houston, who had been killed in action over the Pacific. So he knew a lot of details there.
It's pretty obvious, that one, I think.
Do you think his parents were...
parents
were feeding him?
No, he's just a little history neek. He can read at a young age, just loves it. You know.
To be fair, he's watching the History Channel.
He's watching History Channel.
The
thing is, with those sort of, like, yeah, I do know that case, and there's a limit to it, because myself, I can never know exactly what's going on in those things. And obviously when you say these things, it's unbelievable.
Well, you also can't argue against it, because what he's saying is true. But what we have at the moment... How do I even
know he said it?
But yeah, there's that as well. But at the moment as well, we do have unlimited access to resources online, and like, you don't just learn from your parents anymore at a young age. And so he could have seen it on, I
mean, you do get kids that are just not even
genius.
You
will have heard it once.
But then there's also an argument where, like, you know, you were saying about history neeks, like maybe yourself, I don't know, but, where they know a lot and they're naturally gifted in that subject. Is that because in their previous life, you know, they had exposure to?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. So they're naturally going to tend towards.
Well, in the way that you get some people that are just they just get it.
Yeah,
and they just get it.
Savants.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so I think to rattle through the last few topics, because we're coming right to the end of our time here. There was just one other type of déjà vu, which is called jamais vu. Have you heard of this?
No, I've not heard of that.
So déjà vu is French for already seen, whereas jamais vu is never seen, and it's a much scarier one of being in a familiar situation but not recognizing it and having a real feeling of unsettled.
I think that's more common.
So, for example, can you imagine going home and seeing your mum and just being like, I know that's you because it looks like you, but I really don't feel like it's you.
Oh, I see.
And like, I'm at home and I know I'm home, but
so
I really don't feel, it feels very unfamiliar.
Oh, wow.
So it's something that should be familiar, but is actually unfamiliar.
That's horrific.
And so people...
And you know it's familiar, like it's your home.
I mean,
you get in the car, you drive home, you know you're pulling into your house, you walk in and you go, this isn't my house.
And you see a woman really cooking at the table and she goes, hi, like, honey, how are you? How's your day in school? And you're there like,
nah,
you're not my mum. And apparently it's terrifying. And obviously it's common in a lot of psychological disorders. But funny enough, this is one that can be evoked in a laboratory. And you might have experienced yourselves in a minor way. It's called semantic satiation. So if you write the same word down 100 times in a minute or say the same word over and over again, what is a familiar word feels very unfamiliar.
Yeah.
So if you write the word door 60 times over, by the end of it, you just start going, gosh, is that even a real word? And you know it is, but it feels so foreign and unusual that you almost get...
desensitized to the reality.
Yeah.
For me, that seems very, like, I can understand why that might happen. But then linking that to, like, going into your own home, I can't see how that could ever happen. But the fact is that those two are very similar things. Like, you would do something lots of times, and for door, I can understand how it doesn't look like a word. So
I've never had it before.
Have you had it? No, I've never had it.
Honestly, when you hear people's stories about it, it's horrifying. Like,
I mean, that is
coming
terrifying.
home to your wife and being like, I don't recognize you.
And does it last for? Does it? Like, how do you?
It tends to be like déjà vu, like the feeling of it, unless it's a psychological disorder. But I mean, obviously, if you're paranoid schizophrenic, you know, or I mean, I'm not educated to speak on this topic in any depth, but you know, you have mental disorders where, you know, people can look at someone they know and just be like, there's actually a...
But if you have a déjà vu episode, you think about it for a period of time afterwards, like maybe even a week if it's like quite a serious one where you're like, whoa, what happened there? Yeah. So if you don't recognize your wife, are you not thinking for like a week after?
Yeah,
you're like,
you'd be weird.
I don't know.
There actually is one that I've written down called Capgras syndrome. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but it's where a person is convinced that those that they're familiar with, they've all been replaced by imposters. So if you've got this syndrome, you just start believing that everyone you know, it's not them, it's imposters, and that would be utterly terrifying.
That's one of the worst things I can even, like, disorders that I can even think of. I never even...
But the thing is with that déjà vu and jamais vu, in my eyes, or from my own understanding from what you've said, it doesn't last very long. So where if it does elongate throughout like a period of time, then that is a mental disorder, right?
Like a syndrome.
Whereas a déjà vu, when that happens...
And jamais vu, it's the sensation in the moment.
It's the sensation, and then you're like, oh, You literally a second after, you're like, that was
But
strange.
it still would be weird. You would think
I'm just
about it
thinking
for a while,
with
just
déjà vu,
being
I
like,
think
why
about
did
it,
I
no?
feel like I couldn't recognize you? That would be
Exactly.
scary.
And if I didn't know that existed, I'd be like, okay, really, what is going on here?
And there's one more kind of similar one called the Frigoli delusion, which is a rare disorder in which the person is convinced that many or all the people they meet are really one person in many disguises. So if you go see your mum, your dad, your sister, and then a friend, you kind of go, I don't recognize you. I think you're this one person in many disguises. And so the final interesting thing I wanted to talk about is the Mandela Effect. So this basically refers to a situation where a large number of people believed that something existed when it didn't. So then it was first coined by a woman called Fiona Broome when she created a website to detail her observance of the phenomenon. She basically was convinced that Nelson Mandela died in a South African prison in the 80s, whereas actually he ended up dying in 2013. And so there's a bunch of things where people are convinced that something is true and it turns out it's not. So for example, I'll give you an example. So finish the lyrics in Snow White. Do you know this one?
No, but I know I'm gonna get it wrong. That's the point of it, isn't
So
it?
finish the lyrics in Snow White. The seven dwarfs sing hi ho, hi ho.
Off the snow we go.
Off to work we go, but it's not that, is it?
Yeah.
It's home from work we go.
Oh, is
And
it?
so that's one where people go.
Wait, so they're not even. Oh,
So
they're
they go
coming
hi ho.
home.
They're coming home. They're
I
going
thought
hi
they were
ho,
going-
hi ho.
I
It's
thought they're
home
going off
from
to
work.
work.
No,
They're
it's
going
the
off
other
the
way
9 to
around.
5.
Yeah,
way.
they've come home.
It made sense because why would they be singing so happily about going to work?
I know exactly. Yeah. I
Amazing.
think probably I don't know. Yeah,
Unless they love their job.
undertones of them trying to get kids convinced that they'll love work one
Well,
day.
maybe that's it.
Febreze. How would you spell Febreze?
No way. Febreze.
I'd do it, I don't know. I think Frbeeeezed.
So
As in the spray.
Yeah, I always thought it was EEZE, like Febreze,
Is
it? Yeah.
EEZE, but
Yeah.
it's actually only one
Oh,
E.
really?
Oh,
Which
really?
was Looney Tunes. How do you spell Looney Tunes?
Oh, I think I've seen this one.
Oh, is it with O's?
So a lot of people, including me, were convinced that it was Looney Tunes, TOONS,
Yeah.
but it's actually UNES.
Yeah.
I've seen
Oh,
that.
wow. No, I
you
wouldn't
knew
have
this
known
one. The Monopoly
Yeah.
man with his monocle. You know, can you picture the Monopoly man
Yeah.
and his little monocle
He's got a little tash, hasn't
and a moustache?
Yeah.
But can you picture his little? Do you know what I mean by monocle?
he?
Just say no. Just say
See,
no.
these aren't working on any of you because you
No,
know them.
I mean that one has got me multiple times before.
Yeah,
and
I
know-
always thought the Monopoly man with his little top hat had a
Yeah.
monocle.
Definitely,
But
definitely.
he didn't.
It's crazy.
Have you ever watched Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs with the line, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?
Yeah.
Well, it's not that though, is it?
It's not. It's magic mirror
Magic
on the
mirror.
wall.
I know.
Oh.
So she doesn't ever say mirror, mirror on the wall. That's
See, that's one of them where I'm like, I have to go back and watch
yeah.
or read because that is nuts.
Are you Star Wars nerds?
No.
No.
Okay, Star Wars, obviously, Darth Vader's most iconic line. What does he say?
I'll be
Oh,
back.
I am your father.
What does he say
Oh,
before that?
Oh,
Luke.
Luke, yeah, I am your father.
Luke, I am your father. That's
Yeah.
the common
Yeah,
Mandela
yeah,
effect. He never says, Luke, I am your father. He says, no, I am your father.
Oh,
Which a lot
right.
of people get wrong, but if you haven't watched Star Wars, I
Yeah.
mean...
I think I just said I'll be back for.
yeah, that's Arnold Schwarzenegger in the
Terminator, yeah.
I'll be back, Luke Skywalker.
No, he says that. I'm pretty sure I've seen all the Star
But it's
Wars.
when people, but it's when
Hey.
it stems from people also repeating it wrong as well, because a lot of people learn from, like, say for instance, I haven't really watched Star Wars, but I know that line
Yes,
from
exactly.
Yeah.
other people. So
I
fair.
can't really picture that scene, to be fair.
Yeah.
Because I haven't watched.
okay.
I haven't watched the films.
Have you
but-
seen Breaking Bad? This is my last
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
So you know Jesse when he goes science bitch and like it's a
Yeah.
meme like made of it. He never says that.
Really?
Yeah. So there's a bit where Jesse Pinkman in the show goes, he says, yeah, Mr. White, yeah, science. And someone just made a meme of him going like that and put science bitch, and it's become a really popular meme. And it makes loads of people think that he said it, but he never actually said it in the show.
But to what extent is it like
yeah,
you're
'cause
saying?
that's literally just
'Cause if you haven't
that's
s-
false information spread
Yeah, so
through
yeah.
meme culture.
Yeah.
So that one makes sense in that sense, but a lot of people think that a lot of the explanations for déjà vu come back to the reasons we experience Mandela Effect, where there's a parallel universe in which it's Looney Tunes with double O rather than tunes, and there's a parallel universe
Wow.
in which C3PO is entirely gold and doesn't have a silver leg, but he has a silver leg in our one, or where Darth Vader
He's
says,
got a silver leg, does he?
yeah, he does. One of his legs is silver,
Wow.
but
I
a lot of
would've
people
known
think
that.
he's just an entirely gold thing. So, Yeah, it all comes back to kind of the general topic of just like, you know, what is reality?
Yeah. But so why would Looney Tunes with two O's, why would that be more in our mind than the U? Like, why would one...
So people think that at one point when it's split realities, it's the same kind of slightly less scientific possibility of there being cognition between your brain and the universe where it exists with OO and the universe where it exists with the U. And it's kind of you tapping into your memory on a separate plane.
And then that's just one example of many things.
And that's just one example of many things that are different in parallel universes where there are almost parallel, where it's slight changes.
Yeah.
And you're just accessing knowledge from those. Or perhaps it's part of a simulation, you know, where it hasn't rendered properly. You know, there was never a decided it was O or it was U or OO or U.
There was a meeting and they couldn't decide.
It was a sort of, it wasn't rendered at
different
the time.
code.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, I was going to say, is it kind of similar to the, you know, those kind of brain teasers where they mess with your mind a little bit? Kind of like the what was it? The blue and black dress versus the gold and white one.
Yeah.
Where it could just be a split of that like parallel universe.
Yeah.
Like rapidly going in between. Where like,
maybe.
you know what I mean? Where it's people see it differently, or is it just an illusion?
But that one comes back to like your perception of reality, and it's things like that which make me think, okay, so we clearly don't all see things the same. That's a fact.
Yeah.
Yanni and Laurel as well.
Yanni, Laurel, exactly.
Which is scary, yeah.
And so that's like a clear example of we don't want to see things the same. So to what extent do we not see, like how different do we see things? You know?
Yeah. That is ultimately the question of today's podcast. You know, what is reality? Can we trust anything we experience or sense? You know, is there a simple scientific explanation because it's all going on in our brain? Or are we in a simulation? Are there parallel universes? Who knows? But it's been a really enjoyable discussion. Guys, you should definitely get involved in the comments and the DMs. Let us know what you think about a lot of these takes. Perhaps you can definitely educate us on a lot of the topics that we've spoken about in greater depth. But thanks for joining us today on the podcast.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
And thank you guys for watching. At fredarthurpod on all socials, fredarthurpod.com for links to everything. And we'll see you on the next one.